The scruffy man is about to be hanged, his fate already sealed in front of a crowd eager to witness his execution. But just as everything seems certain, a beautiful young woman steps forward, determined to save his life. She approaches the prison warden and tries to negotiate for the man's freedom. At first, the warden refuses, but then the young woman reveals a shocking piece of information.
I will give you £100 to save this man's life.
Any last requests, pig?
£500.
The condemned man is not just an ordinary prisoner. He knows the location of Hamunaptra, an ancient city known as the City of the Dead, a place rumored to hold unimaginable treasures.
No! He knows the location to Hamunaptra. 10%.
50%.
20. 30.
25.
Deal.
Suddenly, what seemed like a simple execution turns into the beginning of a dangerous adventure. This is the mummy. Long before any of this, back in ancient Egypt, in the grand city of Thebes, there lived a powerful royal priest named Imhotep. Behind the palace walls, he falls into a forbidden affair with Ankh-Sunamun, the pharaoh's own wife. It does not stay secret for long. The pharaoh discovers the betrayal, and his rage turns the entire palace into a death trap. In the chaos, Ankh-Sunamun makes a desperate move and kills the pharaoh.
Listen.
She urges Imhotep to save her, but she also knows there is no real escape. Before the guards close in, she forces Imhotep to promise something unthinkable, that he will bring her back from the dead. Imhotep and his followers steal her body in secret and carry it into Hamunaptra, the City of the Dead, a forbidden burial ground and treasure vault of the pharaohs. Driven by obsession, Imhotep defies the gods themselves by taking the Book of the Dead, a black ancient text said to command life and death. Using its power, he begins a ritual to call Ankh-Sunamun's spirit back into her body. But the ritual never gets to finish. The royal soldiers storm in and catch him mid-spell. For this crime, Imhotep and his followers are sentenced to a fate worse than execution. They are mummified alive, and for Imhotep, the punishment is far more terrifying. Still alive inside his wrappings, Imhotep is sealed into a stone sarcophagus with flesh-eating scarab beetles, then buried deep beneath the statue of Anubis, hidden away to be forgotten for eternity. 3,000 years later, Hamunaptra is no longer just a cursed legend. A group of American soldiers arrive, convinced that a massive treasure is buried there. Their presence quickly draws the attention of Egyptian forces, and what starts as a treasure hunt turns into a full-scale battle. Rick is one of the soldiers caught in the chaos. When his commanding officer runs, Rick is forced to step up and lead. His friend Benny does the opposite and bolts out of pure fear. The Egyptian troops greatly outnumber the Americans, and the fight quickly turns into a disaster. Rick ends up surrounded with no way out. But just as it seems over for him, the Egyptian soldiers suddenly retreat after noticing the towering statue of Anubis behind him. Rick wastes no time and escapes into the open desert. Watching from a distance is a mysterious group known as the Magi, guardians sworn to prevent Imhotep from ever rising again. Their leader, Ardeth Bey, silently observes Rick as he disappears into the sands. 3 years later, the story shifts to Cairo. Evelyn, a brilliant but clumsy librarian, accidentally knocks over an entire row of bookshelves at the museum where she works. Her boss, Terrence, is furious. He reminds her that if it were not for her father's reputation, she would have been fired long ago. Soon after, her older brother Jonathan shows up with something interesting. He asks Evelyn to take a look at a strange box he has acquired. When she opens it, she finds a map inside. Since Evelyn can read ancient Egyptian, she immediately realizes what she is looking at. It is a map to Hamunaptra, the legendary city of the dead said to hold unimaginable treasure. Evelyn excitedly presents the map to Terrence, pointing out what she believes is an official seal from a pharaoh 3,000 years ago. She even identifies a marking that could represent Hamunaptra itself. Terrence dismisses it as nothing more than a myth created to entertain tourists. But Evelyn is absolutely convinced the city is real. Then disaster strikes again. Terrence accidentally sets the map on fire.
Fairy tales and oh my goodness! Look at that!
Evelyn and Jonathan rush to put it out, but much of the crucial detail is already burned away. Terrence tells her to forget about the whole fantasy, yet Evelyn refuses to let it go. Determined to trace the map back to its source, Evelyn asks Jonathan where he found the box. It turns out he got it from a prisoner. So the two head straight to the prison. The warden leads Evelyn to the inmate in question, and to her surprise, it is Rick. She asks him where he found the box. Rick explains that he discovered it in Hamunaptra. Evelyn is stunned. Not only is the city real, but Rick has actually been there. She presses him for its location. Rick makes it clear that he will take her there, but only if she can get him out. The problem is, Rick is scheduled to be hanged that very day. After some intense bargaining with the warden, Evelyn manages to secure Rick's release just moments before the execution can happen. And with that, their dangerous expedition truly begins.
10%.
50%.
20.
40.
30.
25.
Ah! Deal.
Cut them down.
Later that afternoon, Evelyn, Jonathan, Rick, and the warden board a ship bound for Hamunaptra. But they are not the only ones chasing the legend. A group of Americans is also on board, heading to the same destination. When they realize Rick is going too, they challenge him to a race to see who can reach the city first. Rick starts to wonder how they seem so confident. He asks Evelyn why she is so determined to find Hamunaptra, especially when every story about it describes it as cursed. Evelyn is not interested in superstition. She believes the city holds the Book of Amun-Ra, a solid gold text filled with ancient Egyptian knowledge. After that conversation, Rick runs into Benny and discovers something unexpected. Benny is the one guiding the American group. Still bitter about being abandoned years earlier, Rick reacts on impulse and tosses Benny straight into the water. Not long after, Rick notices wet footprints on the deck and immediately grows suspicious. At the same time, members of the Magi suddenly appear in Evelyn's cabin. They demand the map and a key she does not even realize she has. Before things can get worse, Rick intervenes and opens fire. The chaos sparks a fire that quickly spreads. Rick and Evelyn manage to escape. Jonathan spots the Magi in the cabin, grabs the mysterious key box, and makes a run for it. The flames rapidly consume the ship, forcing everyone, including Rick, to jump overboard with whatever they can carry. Fortunately, the ship is already close to shore, and they all make it safely to land. The next morning, Rick and the others purchase 4 camels and set off across the Sahara Desert. They travel from day into night until Rick decides to stop and wait for sunrise. As the first light breaks over the horizon, Hamunaptra finally reveals itself. And right beside them, Benny and the American team are already there. Both groups immediately race toward the lost city. Once inside Hamunaptra, they set up camp and prepare to explore. According to ancient records, the Book of Amun-Ra is hidden beneath the statue of Anubis. Before heading underground, Evelyn carefully positions a series of ancient mirrors. When they descend, the mirrors reflect sunlight down into the chamber, illuminating the darkness. They move deeper into the ruins and eventually reach the base of the statue. The American group arrives at the same spot, and tensions rise as both sides compete for the right to dig. Then Evelyn notices something unusual and urges Rick to let the Americans take that section. She believes she has discovered a hidden chamber beneath the statue. Evelyn, Rick, and Jonathan head down into the newly found space, while the warden decides to wander off alone in search of treasure. During his search, he finds a blue scarab beetle embedded in the wall. Mistaking it for a valuable jewel, he pulls it out without a second thought. Elsewhere in the ruins, the American team uncovers a chest beneath the statue of Anubis. Dr. Allen orders the diggers to open it. The moment they do, a burst of acid sprays out, burning the men who are standing too close. Below ground, Jonathan accidentally knocks against a wall, causing a heavy sarcophagus to fall right in front of them. None of them realize they are staring at the coffin of Imhotep himself. At the same time, the warden drops one of the blue scarabs he took from the wall. Suddenly, a living creature crawls out of it and burrows straight into his body, devouring him from the inside. Back with Rick and Evelyn, Rick notices a pattern on the fallen sarcophagus that matches the key box they brought with them. Just as Evelyn prepares to open it, they hear the warden screaming. He comes running in blind panic, only to slam into a wall and collapse, dead in seconds. That night, as they try to process the warden's strange death, Jonathan begins to believe the stories about Hamunaptra being cursed might be true. Then the Magi attack without warning. Rick and the Americans fight back fiercely until Ardith steps in and stops the clash. He warns them to leave immediately. If they stay, they will die. He gives them 1 day to pack up before the Magi disappear into the desert. Instead of taking the warning seriously, the American group sees it as proof that something valuable is hidden there. The next day, they finally manage to haul out the box from beneath the statue. Dr. Allen reads the ancient inscription carved on it. A strange sound echoes through the ruins, sending the workers scrambling in fear. The inscription speaks of a living corpse that will hunt down anyone who opens the chest, draining them of their bodily fluids and organs to grow stronger, unleashing devastation upon the world. Benny decides that is more than enough for him and tries to flee. But Dr. Allen, along with Henderson, Burns, and Daniel, refuse to believe in curses. They open the box anyway. Inside, they find the Black Book of the Dead and sacred jars that once held the organs of a mummy. Elsewhere, Evelyn finally opens the sarcophagus in front of her. She is shocked to see that the mummy inside still appears wet, even though it has been sealed for over 3,000 years. They notice deep scratch marks on the inside of the lid, a horrifying sign that the mummy was buried alive. As they prepare to leave, Evelyn spots Dr. Allen with the Black Book of the Dead. Later that night, driven by curiosity, she secretly takes the book and unlocks it with her key. She believes it to be the Book of Amun-Ra. Without realizing the danger, she reads aloud from the ancient text, reciting a spell that awakens Imhotep. Dr. Allen wakes up and tries to stop her, but it is too late. Imhotep rises once again. In an instant, swarms of insects pour out and attack.
Amun-Ra, Amun-Day.
Panic spreads, and everyone runs for shelter inside the cave. In the chaos, Burns is left behind after dropping his glasses. Unable to see clearly, he struggles to find the others. And then, from behind him, the resurrected Imhotep closes in. Somewhere else in the ruins, Rick, Evelyn, and Jonathan are running for their lives as scarab beetles swarm after them. In the chaos, Evelyn stumbles into a separate chamber. When she turns around, she is horrified to see Burns, now missing his eyes and his tongue. And then Imhotep appears, moving in a way that feels unnatural and wrong. He looks at Evelyn and calls her Ankh-Su-Namun. Rick and Jonathan rush in just in time. Rick opens fire on Imhotep and pulls Evelyn away. When they make it outside, Ardith and his men are already waiting with weapons drawn. Ardith is furious. He warns them that they have unleashed something unstoppable. Because they ignored his warning, they have awakened Imhotep, and now death will follow. It turns out Ardith also managed to save Burns from being completely taken. He orders everyone to leave immediately. The Magi will stay behind and try to find a way to stop Imhotep before he regains his full strength. Inside the ruins, Benny ends up face to face with Imhotep. Instead of killing him, Imhotep sees potential. He spares Benny and turns him into a servant, ordering him to reveal the location of the Americans who opened the chest containing the Black Book of the Dead. Benny agrees without hesitation, especially when he is rewarded with gold. Before long, Rick and the others return to Cairo. Rick urges Evelyn to go back to America, believing it is the safest choice. But Evelyn refuses. She feels responsible for what happened. She was the one who read the spell. She wants to stay and fix it. Meanwhile, Benny leads Imhotep straight to Burns. One by one, Imhotep begins draining the life from those who open the chest, absorbing their bodily fluids to restore himself. Each victim makes him stronger. Not long after, Rick, Jonathan, Henderson, and Daniel notice something disturbing. A fountain suddenly turns red. It is a clear sign that Imhotep has arrived. Rick tells Evelyn they need to leave. Then chaos erupts as fiery debris rains down and lightning strikes, setting parts of the city ablaze. Rick spots Benny running in fear. Suspicious, he and Evelyn follow him into Burns' room. What they find is chilling. Burns is nothing more than a skeleton. Imhotep is there too, already regaining his form. Rick fires at him, but the bullets do nothing. Imhotep easily throws Rick aside and even shows a twisted sense of gratitude toward Evelyn for bringing him back. Suddenly, a cat appears, and for the first time, Imhotep hesitates. Fear flashes across his face and he retreats. Seizing the opportunity, Evelyn and the others head to the museum where she works, hoping Terrence can help them understand what is happening. At the museum, Evelyn is shocked to see Terrence with Ardith. It turns out Terrence is secretly one of the Magi. Rick learns that cats are sacred guardians of the underworld. As long as Imhotep has not fully regained his strength, he will fear them. But once he becomes whole again, nothing will frighten him. Evelyn also reveals that Imhotep called her Ankh-Su-Namun. That detail alarms both Terrence and Ardith. It means Imhotep intends to use Evelyn as a sacrifice to resurrect Ankh-Su-Namun. Back at the hotel, Rick decides they must find Dr. Allen before it is too late. Evelyn refuses to stay behind, but Rick locks her safely in her room and leaves Henderson and Daniel to guard her. He and Jonathan head out to track down Dr. Allen, knowing they are running out of time. Elsewhere, Dr. Allen decides to leave with the Black Book of the Dead in his possession, hoping to protect it. What he does not realize is that Imhotep is following him from the shadows. At the same time, Benny sneaks into Dr. Allen's home to steal the book, but he comes up empty. Rick and Jonathan arrive soon after and quickly realize Benny is now working for Imhotep. Rick corners him and forces him to reveal what Imhotep is planning. Terrified, Benny admits that Imhotep intends to resurrect Ankh-Sunamun, and Evelyn will be the sacrifice. The ritual will require the Black Book of the Dead. Suddenly, a scream echoes nearby. Benny takes advantage of the distraction and runs. Rick and Jonathan rush toward the sound and find Dr. Allen reduced to nothing but a skeleton, completely drained by Imhotep. Standing there, stronger than before, Imhotep unleashes a swarm of insects from his mouth. Rick and Jonathan barely escape. Back at the hotel, Daniel grows impatient and leaves his post, telling Henderson to stay and guard Evelyn's room. In a terrifying moment, Imhotep transforms into a wave of sand and slips inside. Henderson is helpless as Imhotep drains him, restoring even more of his strength. Imhotep then enters Evelyn's room. Just in time, Rick and Jonathan burst in, carrying a cat. The sight of it forces Imhotep to retreat once again. Realizing they need answers, Evelyn and the others head back to the museum. They believe the Golden Book of Amun-Ra may hold the key to defeating him. Their hope is interrupted when a rumble shakes the building. Outside, crowds of people under Imhotep's dark influence begin to gather and force their way inside. As chaos spreads, Evelyn studies an inscription and makes a crucial discovery. The Book of Amun-Ra is hidden in Hamunaptra, beneath the statue of Horus. With no time to waste, they leave immediately. On the way, Rick drives straight through waves of Imhotep's followers trying to stop them. In the struggle, Daniel is dragged away. From within the crowd, Imhotep appears and drains Daniel's life. With that final act, his power becomes complete. Soon, Rick and the others find themselves surrounded. Imhotep approaches and demands that Evelyn come with him. He promises to spare Rick and the rest if she agrees. Wanting to save her friends, Evelyn reluctantly goes with him. Rick is ready to attack, but Ardeth stops him, knowing it would be useless. Instead, he urges Rick to focus on finding the Book of Amun-Ra. That is their only chance. As Imhotep prepares to leave, he breaks his promise and orders his followers to kill Rick and the others anyway. Panic erupts, and they escape through the sewers. Terrence stays behind, sacrificing himself to hold off the attackers so the others can get away. The next day, Rick seeks help from his old friend Winston, a pilot willing to take a dangerous flight back to Hamunaptra. Winston agrees without hesitation. With only 2 seats available, Jonathan and Ardeth are strapped onto the wings as they take off. As their plane approaches Hamunaptra, Imhotep senses their arrival. He chants an incantation that summons a massive sandstorm to stop them. The storm rises and chases the aircraft across the sky. Rick fires into the swirling wall of sand, but it has no effect. As the sandstorm closes in, Evelyn panics and does something completely unexpected. She kisses Imhotep. The shock breaks his concentration, and the storm vanishes instantly. But the plane is already too damaged. It crashes into the desert. Rick, Jonathan, and Ardeth survive, but Winston does not make it. With no time to mourn, they rush back into Hamunaptra. Inside, Jonathan notices a scarab on the wall. Suddenly, it comes to life and burrows into his body. Rick reacts without hesitation, cutting it out and shooting the creature before it can do any more damage. Elsewhere, Evelyn hears gunshots and realizes Rick has returned for her. Imhotep responds by awakening his mummified followers and orders them to kill Rick and the others. Rick and his team push into the treasure chamber, only to have waves of mummies rise from the ground around them. They are forced to retreat as more and more undead warriors appear. In another chamber, Jonathan finally discovers the statue of Horus, the landmark they have been searching for. Rick throws explosives at the advancing mummies to buy them time. Meanwhile, Benny is busy stuffing as much treasure as he can carry, hauling it outside and loading it onto a camel, completely ignoring the chaos unfolding around him. Inside the temple, Imhotep begins the ritual to resurrect Ankh-Sunamun. Terrified, Evelyn calls out for Rick and Jonathan, but they are still struggling to retrieve the Book of Amun-Ra. At last, Rick and Jonathan manage to secure the golden book. Just as they do, more mummies close in. Arda steps forward and tells them to go save Evelyn while he holds the creatures back. Deep within the temple, Imhotep reads from the Black Book of the Dead, calling Ankh-Su-Namun's spirit back into her body. Her mummy awakens, fully restored. Imhotep prepares to kill Evelyn, but Jonathan suddenly appears with the golden book of Amun-Ra. Furious, Imhotep turns his attention to the book instead. Evelyn quickly reveals that the key to unlocking it is hidden inside Imhotep's own robes. Imhotep chases after Jonathan to reclaim it. Rick fights his way through the mummies surrounding Evelyn, slicing them apart, but they continue to move even after being cut down. They overwhelm him for a moment, but he manages to break free and untie Evelyn. Nearby, Jonathan begins reading from the cover of the Book of Amun-Ra. His words summon a new army of mummies. Evelyn urges him to keep going so he can control them. Suddenly, Ankh-Su-Namun rises and attacks Evelyn. As Evelyn struggles, Jonathan finishes the incantation and gains control of the summoned mummies. He orders them to destroy Ankh-Su-Namun, and once again, she falls. Enraged, Imhotep grabs Jonathan and begins to choke him. Rick charges in and cuts off Imhotep's hand, but the hand reattaches itself. Imhotep turns his fury on Rick. In the struggle, Jonathan manages to steal the key from Imhotep's robes. Evelyn tells Rick to keep Imhotep distracted. She unlocks the golden book and begins reading the final spell. A ghostly chariot appears, dragging Imhotep's spirit toward the afterlife. But he is still physically alive and lunges for one last attack. Before he can strike, Rick drives his sword into Imhotep. This time, the wound is real. The curse is broken. Imhotep is no longer immortal, and at last he dies. While everything else is collapsing around them, Benny gives in to his greed one last time. He sneaks back inside to grab even more treasure. But in his rush, he accidentally pulls a lever that triggers a deadly mechanism. Massive doors begin slamming shut throughout the chamber. Realizing the entire structure is about to collapse, Rick, Jonathan, and Evelyn run for the exit. Rick tries to go back for Benny, but it is too late. The doors seal him inside the treasure room, alone with all the gold he was so desperate to claim. Then the scarabs return. Thousands of them swarm over Benny, and his greed finally catches up with him in the worst possible way. Outside, Rick and the others watch as Hamunaptra crumbles and sinks into the desert, erased once again. Ardeth emerges, having survived the chaos. He thanks Rick and his friends for ending Imhotep's reign of terror. With the city reduced to dust behind them, Rick, Evelyn, and Jonathan walk away, carrying the gold that Benny had already gathered. Their adventure in the city of the dead is finally over, and they leave with their lives and a fortune to prove it. So the moral of the story is, do not read spooky ancient books out loud, do not be greedy around cursed treasure, and always keep a cat nearby just in case.